My name is Rodney Rogers. I fish the Fishers of Men National Tournament Trail. Our season is actually over. We have small tournaments here and there. One of the main things I like doing is obviously teaching people how to fish and the things that I've learned on the tournament series, as well as just fishing in general. I've been fishing pretty much since I was 6 years old, which has been a long time. Primarily chasing bass. I do chase redfish and snook and everything else I can because I love fishing in general. And I obviously love teaching fishing. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today is, because I fish just about every day, I'm going to talk about summertime bass. Man, is there almost a harder time to catch bass in summertime? This January when the water temperature was 42 degrees. And believe it or not, in the same relation, it's the same fishing. Except, you know, in January, your fingers are cold. Here, you're sweating, you're sweating to death. So basically, we're just going to talk about a little bit of habitat of bass, why they're biting real slow right now, if you don't know. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. One is metabolism. It's no different in our metabolism. We kind of slow down. You know, we get lazy when the heat because it just drains our energy. Well, for bass, it does the same thing. First of all, the oxygen starts to decrease in the water. So what's the first thing they do? They start slowing down. They don't exert much energy. So one of the things that we primarily focus on is downsizing our bait. But do we have to downsize? Absolutely not. Think of it as sustenance. A bass will still chase a giant bait. The reason is because they exert a little bit of energy and get a lot of food. So they think kind of the same way we do. So we exert a little bit of energy and grab a Whopper versus a cheeseburger. That's the kind of pretense I put it in. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my techniques and what I use and how I do it. One of the cool things is it doesn't matter if I'm fishing out of a canoe, kayak, offshore, off a rock, off a dock, off a bridge, it doesn't matter. I use the same exact techniques. And I mean, these are techniques that have just been refined, and hopefully you pick something up, and if you add it to your arsenal. What I'm going to talk a little bit about right now, and I swear my buddy invented this technique, it's called dead sticking. Has anybody ever dead stick before? Basically what that means is we do nothing. We just throw the bait out there and let it sit. And how that was invented is by one of my fishing partners. He pretty much throws it out there with his bait caster. Next thing you know, he's not best bait caster in the world. He's got this backlash, and he starts just feeding it out, feeding it out, feeding it out. The next thing you know, wham, he catches a fish before you know it. That's pretty much dead sticking. That's exactly what it is. This is an awesome time of the year for that because number one is our strike zones on these fish are smaller. It doesn't matter what fish it is. Is there any fish out there? Doesn't matter what fish it is. Pretty much the strike zone comes down. We go from, let's say April, the springtime bass strike zone, which is about 10 feet. They'll actually chase it. And even as much as 30 feet, they'll chase a lure 30 feet away. So now this is this time of the year when the strike zone kind of downsizes. Basically, we have to get it in their face, in their strike zone, and we have to let it sit a lot longer. We want to keep it in their face because why do bass eat? Hunger, curiosity, certainly anger. Bass are angry fish. So we want to appeal to as many of the senses of those as we can. So while I'm dead sticking, what do? I definitely put scent on my bait. If someone in the audience told me, man, Doritos work great, Cheetos, #1 bait attracted, I'll have a boat full of Cheetos by the end of the day, and I'll be squirting mine down into Cheetos, I promise you. I'll have it all over my fingers, as well as the bait. So I love to put that scent on there because what we're doing is we're adding that little bit of extra, especially this time of year. You want each little piece you can get. So basically we're dead sticking. I've got a big loop here, so we might be switching reels. Okay. We put it out there, and we're letting it sit. And when I say let it sit, I mean as long as 30 seconds. Let it sit in that strike zone. You're always going to catch those real aggressive bass right off the bat. I got a loop here somewhere. Oh, here it is. So we're going to catch those aggressive bass right off the bat. This is how we're going to catch those larger bass. Man, I got a mess here, don't I? So this is how we're going to catch the larger bass. This ain't happening. What's the best way to reel it in? Like this. This technique was perfected by me. I got a big knot there. We'll just leave that sit. So dead sticking. What can you dead stick? Can you dead stick a stick bait? Absolutely. We got suspending jerk baits that are phenomenal this time of the year. you know, fishing around structure, letting it suspend right over that structure and letting it sit there. Now, the techniques that I'm telling you about are not something that I fished with last year. I normally get the fish in the morning that I do the seminars, but I didn't get the fish this morning. I did get the fish yesterday, and pretty much all day yesterday and yesterday morning. So I caught 6 bass yesterday, largest one being about 4.5 pounds. It was really tough. I mean, it was like a whole day to catch those 6 bass. But the big one came first thing in the morning on what we all love. And if you've never fished this lure, I'll promise you, you will become a believer. Zoom frog. I mean, how many of us fish with that? I mean, to me, it's just probably one of the #1 lures out there right now. Let's see make sure I don't do that again. It's one of the #1 lures out there. If you haven't fished with a frog, you're definitely missing out on some big summertime bass. Now, I do a lot of night fishing, and that's a whole nother seminar, especially with the moon the way it is. Night fishing is phenomenal this time of year. Remember, first thing in the morning is our key as far as those topwater bass. The quicker we can get out there in the morning, the quicker we can get that frog or whatever topwater lure we use, the better chance we have of getting a good sized bass, because they're going to be in that shallow water. And as that sun moves up, they're going to move out real fast. And we're going to talk about a little bit of deep water fishing too. So this is one of the lures that I absolutely, positively love. Just so happens that it's the lure that I've caught my largest bass on, which is a 13-pound, 30-inch largemouth. And that's it right there. Now, what did I do different? Basically, I'll pull that right across the top of the water, starting out in the heaviest vegetation I can find, peel it, let it drop. Look at that. Look at those legs on there. Just peel it and let it drop. And if you can get in hydrilla, let it fall down inside of those pockets. Now, as it makes that swirl, guess what? That's going to be your fish. And believe it or not, just because this is a phenomenal topwater lure, doesn't mean you can't fish it underwater just like that. Now, doesn't that just look like a phenomenal worm there? You can fish this lure 100 different ways. And one of the things I always tell people, with this one lure on your pole, you can fish it 50 different methods. So what's that mean? That means we got 50 different lures right here. So I will fish this thing extensively in every possible scenario that I can before I ever switch my bait. I'll switch my retrieve up 100 times before I ever take my bait off, because it may not be, they may want the bait, it may be the retrieve that we're missing. It may be something we're doing, that little bit of pause, the little bit of strike, I mean just a little bit of anything to keep it going, pow. And that's it. So change your retrieve up. One of our biggest mistakes, and we've all done it, and I know I'm still guilty of it this day, we get to the boat, canoe, shoreline, or whatever, we got these giant tackle bags. It looks like we're moving out of the country. Looks like we're fugitives, we're on the run. Got this big bag on our shoulder and pow, we're out of here. We set it in our boat, or we set it wherever, we look inside, and we grab our old trusty go-to lure, be it a Rapala, a worm, and that's pretty much what we stick to all day. And at the end of the day, we go, man, honey, I didn't catch a fish one. Well, what'd you fish? Well, I threw everything, when in fact we didn't. We didn't even go through our tackle box to see what we even have in there. We just feel confident that we have this much gear, and we want to know that if we wanted to, we could switch our baits and could fish with something different. If you're not fishing with something different, you are cheating yourself out of actually catching fish. One of the reasons we actually go fishing. So, frog, if you've never used it, which I would hope you have, if you're not, come see me. I'll certainly go over that with you. So, definitely try that frog out. Now, one of my go-to baits, and has been for years, is a skirted grub. Somehow I came across this bait probably about 15 years ago, and I fished it on a Texas rig, and my God, I never had so much fun in my life on this lure. The largest, believe it or not, as small as this thing looks, the largest fish I've ever caught off of this grub is about 11.5 pounds. Believe me, offshore, it was amazing to me. I just whipped over and said, hey, let me try this lake, and voila, it was a phenomenal. So this became a confidence bait. And when I'm fishing in a tournament, this is one of the first baits that I throw out there, because one of the reasons is it catches fish consistently. Doesn't matter if it's springtime, wintertime, summertime, it doesn't matter. Nighttime, daytime, this for me catches baits consistently. Basically, I mean, it's just small, and this one has the tungsten weight on it. You can see how slow it falls, and then the legs start Look at that. He almost got it right there, didn't he? That's our striped bass, or our hybrid bass. So basically, we're just letting it fall. Look how slow it is and how pretty that fall is. And I'm going to tell you what, it comes in 100 different colors. And man, this is one of my go-to baits. If you've never used a grub, one of our big things is, man, if we don't use big baits, we can't catch big fish. And that is so far, that is so not the truth. Doesn't matter what size your bait is. How we present it, where we present it, and when we present it is what's going to determine our size of fish. This right here, I've caught 10 million small bass and a lot of big bass. Even on a wildlife management area, I managed to reel in a 10-pound bass off of this grub. So it really doesn't matter so much the size as our presentation. And it was a summertime bass. So definitely, if you've never tried to grub, one of the key things I like doing to this is, pow, I'll pull a leg off. If they're not biting on it right away, I'll pull one leg off, I'll throw it back out there and let it fall. Does it look that much different? May not to us. It still has a beautiful fall, but now we're just dropping it with one leg. So I'll fish it, like I said, this is one of the lures that I'll fish several different ways before I give up on the lure. Dry lures don't catch fish. If it's in your boat, you haven't casted it, well, obviously you're not going to catch a fish with it. So you definitely want to keep it out there as much as you can. Now, this is what I caught the majority of my fish on, which is probably 4 out of the 6. The old red-eye shad. Basically, we all know as the rattle trap. I mean, we can call it 100 different names. And voila, you can hear the rattle. Man, this is an oldie but a goodie, especially right now. And the reason is we're appealing to their sense of anger. I mean, if you buy one of these, take it home, and just do this in the back seat, guess what you're going to get? Pop, stop. Because it's aggravating. It's probably one of the most aggravating things you can do. If I just sit here like this, I'd clear this whole room out in 10 minutes. This bait, once those fish start moving off deep water, this is where everything kind of comes into play. This is where we want a long pole, 7-foot rod. We want fluorocarbon line, because why? Because fluorocarbon sinks. And when you're tournament fishing, all those little things, if you add a 2% chance with every small thing you do, well, then you're definitely going to add chances to catch bass. So basically, I toss it out there as far as I can in the deepest water I can find with a little bit of structure, and I just kind of peel it across. Just like that. And what we're doing is we're making these fish super mad. Now, if I just sit here and pop this up and down for a minute, a lot of times I'll get them to run out and knock the fire out of it. So crankbaits. Now, being a Florida fisherman, it was hard for me to get used to that deep water fishing, because we're so, all of our lakes are pretty shallow. So a lot of times we like to fish that shoreline. If you're fishing the shoreline, after about 10 o'clock, you are shutting yourself out of fish. Doesn't mean they're not there, they're just harder to find. They're going to start moving to that little bit deeper water. They're going to move to the 7 and 8 foot range. And once you start catching those fish in that range, definitely pay attention to what you're doing. If you catch a fish in 7 foot, odds are you're going to catch them all in 7 foot, just for a little while. So basically, I just peel it out there. If I get grass on it, I'll give it a hard jerk. Sound travels 3 times farther in water than it does in air. It's actually like 7 times, if I'm not mistaken. So it travels a lot farther. So those fish are more apt to chase it a lot farther. So if you're definitely not using a rattle trap, pick one up. I mean, they've got them over here for $1.99. To me, honestly, I mean, between the $9 one and the $2 one, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, does it rattle? Absolutely. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm appealing to those senses. That sense of aggravation. So definitely pick one of those up. One of the things I want to point out is I'm not sponsored by any of these lures. I try to fish with what works, and I try to tell you about what works. I mean, there's certain sponsors that'll make you talk about certain things because they want you to pitch it, and obviously that's a good thing. So definitely give it a shot, try it out. No, boy, did I just mess this up. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about, basically we're going to really get basic here. We're going to go way back. Wish you guys were up here. I'd teach you how to get a knot out. We're going to go 20 years back. Okay. making a mess here. Now, one of the other bulk things I caught my fish on this morning. Okay, there we go. I just dropped that right there. And I'm going to show you with this. Thank you so much. What we do is we try to, I do a lot of seminars for beginning fishers. And if I had one lure to pick to fish with in the world, it would always be a Rapala. Most of us started fishing with a Rapala when we were 6, 7 years old. I taught my children how to do it. They taught their children how to do it. And check this out. One of the reels that I've used since I can remember, I still have one in my truck today, is a Zebco 33. And we've all probably fished with one. We all probably have one or had one at one time. One of the good things I like about it, it's nice and simple. You can teach a 6-year-old how to fish with this reel. And I believe it or not, I still keep one in my bass boat, not during a tournament, but when I'm just out fishing, because a lot of times it's just a nice reel to get in those tight spots. So what I do with it this morning or yesterday, I flipped with it. I actually put a jig on and flipped with it. Not because I was really expecting a large bass. I did catch one about 2.5, 3 pounds, but I was just trying to get the feel of flipping with that to show my daughter how to flip. She picked up on it right away. And what I like to do is if I'm fishing that same gear with her, she can relate to it a lot simpler. She loves that Zebco 33. And she started catching bass flipping for the first time. So now she's become a flipper. Now what do I mean by flipping? Basically, this is what I normally flip with. What we're doing is we're flipping and pitching. We're getting to the structure, because remember, these bass are hanging around structure. They are absolute predators. They're no different than a lion on the plains of Africa waiting for a wildebeest to come by. We want to get as close to that structure as possible and drop that bait down in there and just keep popping it, just like that right there. And that's how I caught my second biggest fish, was flipping. Now, can you catch giant fish? You bet your booty you can. I mean, you can catch 10, 11 pounders. I've done it. It's just flipping is a patience thing. If you've never flipped before and you're doing it for the first time, a lot of times you get frustrated with it because you may make 50 casts before you ever get any results. But the odds are the results on that cast is going to be a really good fish. So definitely try flipping out. Find that structure. It doesn't matter if it's a lily pad, a stick sticking out of the water, or anything of the sort, and get on in there. Now when I see a mat, a grass mat of some sort, I always like to get off at a distance, about 30 or 40 feet, and pitch just to the outside of the grass mat. Let's say that log right there. And then just catch the outside of it, just like that. And then I work my boat, canoe, or I walk up to it as close as I can. Believe it or not, I pitch a lot of ponds. You know, I pitched garbage bags floating in the water. I just pitched to that garbage bag and caught 5-pound bass out of a garbage bag, or a Walmart shopping bag or something of that sort, and then pull the bag out of the water. But just flip that outside edge and work your way in, because if you catch those small fish just on the outside, believe it or not, it really doesn't affect deep inside that mat. Oh, he grabbed it, didn't he? So put it out there and flip it in there. Now I'm telling you, you'd be surprised what you can catch. I actually had a hit on it, and when I set the hook, it was like right at the boat, and I set the hook. The lure came out of the water, and I told my daughter, I said, my God, that was a big one. Yeah, it's always a big one when you didn't see it. No sooner than I got that out of my mouth, a little warmouth hit the center of the boat and started flopping around. She said, big, huh? So you'd be surprised what bites it while you're flipping. It could be bluegill. We've caught bluegill off of it. I mean, you'd be surprised what bites it. So I'm actually over here in the fishing section. I got a table set up about with what I'm talking about. I'll be over there shortly, answer any questions that you have. If you have methods that you use or something you want to ask me about, I'll be happy to tell you about it and certainly be, excited to go over it with you. So if you have any questions, I'll be over there. Don't forget about our fish feeding. 1:30, that's a pretty cool thing. And I believe we have the alligator over in the camping section, if I'm not mistaken. So if you haven't seen that yet, definitely scoot over there and check that out. Thanks a lot for listening. I appreciate it, and I'll see you on the other side.